Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. In this podcast episode, our guest lecturer is Thom Ives, who has a PhD in mechanical engineering and is also the lead data scientist for a company called UL. In this podcast episode, we're going to be focusing on how to become an effective analyst. And what makes this podcast or this conversation so interesting is that me and Thom are on completely, totally different wavelengths when it comes to analytics. Thom is very technical and mathematic focused, to where I'm essentially a management consultant with just a little bit of analysis sprinkled in. So us talking about what makes an effective analyst is a pretty nuanced conversation because me and Thom actually clash a little bit on what we believe as far as, that statement of how can I become an effective analyst. Then we're going to hop over to the interactive section. So instead of like what we usually do where we have a Greensboro College student come on and we either critique a resume or a LinkedIn page or maybe even a mock interview question, we're mixing up this week and we're going to have someone who's already out in the working world, and she's going to come and talk to me and Thom about how she can transition into the analytics space. She is currently a data mining specialist for a company and wants to get more into a more robust analytics role. So we're calling this section data therapy. So she's going to tell us what's going on in her journey, and then me and Thom are going to brainstorm and help her provide some solutions to her problems. Then we're going to round out the episode with our social media manager, Al Bellamy, who is going to facilitate the Q&A section where the questions are submitted from LinkedIn. So if you're new to the podcast, you can actually join in on the conversation by looking us up on LinkedIn, following our LinkedIn webpage, and starting to contribute. So each week we have an opportunity where you can submit questions to the experts that we interview. Al then rounds up those questions and asks them at the end of each podcast episode. This podcast is brought to you by Panoply. Panoply is a platform that connects to over 60 different data sources, where you can study your data in SQL, visualize it in platforms like Power BI or Tableau, or even analyze your data in your favorite programming language. Click the link in the description down below and you can get a free 12-day trial to panoply.io. One more thing before we jump into the podcast. If you're getting value out of these podcast episodes, the best thing that you can do to give back to us is to leave a comment in the comment section down below, or even share this video with your network. Those will help boost our signal out on the YouTube algorithm so that we can help even more people land their next analytics opportunity. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast episode. Thom Ives, I love the background that you have. Are you somewhere in Montana up in a big mountain cabin right now?
This place, this old thing, this is just my shop. It's so messy right now. No, in honesty, there's a dog crate behind me, and the puppy that lives in it is ruling our household. And my wife asked me to please don't let that dog crate be on camera. So
Well,
that's the honest truth.
I'm disappointed that you did not have a cat filter on. I don't know if you guys saw that meme of the lawyer.
I only have 4 cats. I should have done that.
All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to become an effective analyst. And in the kind of pre-interview prep, Thom, you and we disagree. And we're going to have, I think this is going to be full of, I would say, some nice debate. But I think I'm more in the business analyst camp and you're more in the data science, data analyst camp. And it's really interesting that things that I would advise do not apply to the people that you're talking to, and I would say vice versa. So I'm going to start off with this question. What makes a good or an effective analyst?
So I tend to not like that dichotomy. I realize a lot of times the analyst is reserved for people working more on the business side, and sometimes the data science is more on, well, I don't know. It's kind of
Nebulous.
Yes, thank you. That's the word I was wanting. And I don't really like the dichotomy, just like I don't like for my dear friends Scott Taylor, Kate Strackney, Susan Walsh, George Farrakhan to feel like they have to qualify. Well, I'm not a data scientist or a data analyst. I'm like, well, gosh, but what you guys do is so important to data evangelism. I just don't like to be too hyper focused on those differences, but I'm always open to being wrong, I hope. And I've just not, most of my background, John David's been in the engineering realms with my data science. In fact, I try to help people understand, well, my first real data science action was doing least squares by hand in a physics lab in 1980. So, it's just, I've been doing it for longer than it's been called data science. And we called it what we call data science now, engineers would have called back then, oh, you're doing empirical modeling then. Okay. And so, but trying to apply the level of modeling skills I've developed and practiced over the decades to the business realm, I've wanted to do more of that, but I can't say I completely appreciate the dichotomy between using data predictive skills, data analytical skills in the business realm versus the more scientific realms. But I'm still ready to argue.
Yeah. All right. Let's argue because so we had a group chat with me, you, Al, and Molly. So a little sneak preview of what's going on. We're having our first kind of career transitioner. So this is someone I've known for years who is looking to transition their career. So she's actually working. I mean, we still have Christina. So we still have some Greensboro College students represented on the podcast. But what you said in that chat was that you don't think that data specialist or data scientist should have a deep knowledge of business domain or business acumen?
What I'm saying is, let me paint it out. Let's say that you don't have great business acumen in the domain you're serving. You're there to help bring the value of data to decision making and to other areas of the business. Now, let's say you're trying to make sure you're applying your skill set to that job, to that role. You go to a key business stakeholder and you try to pose yourself as, I have some business acumen that you need to listen to. You're posing yourself as we need to do this because I think this is important. I think you've missed the boat completely. You need to be going to those stakeholders and find out where are you bleeding? Where are you afraid? What are your pain points? Let me see how I can bring data to help with that. You want to be the data hero. You want to show how data can answer problems. And so if you go in there, guns pulled and saying, I've got great business acumen in this, you've got to listen to me. I think you've already lost your listener. It's a spirit of, well, what do you care about? Where do you see the greatest needs of the business? Now that we have a list, let's triage it and create a matrix and say, well, what data do we have on hand? Okay, let's tackle this one that we already have data on hand. In this other area, we don't have enough data yet. So let's start collecting data for that. And then as you dive in to try to show them what data can do, show them your path. Like you've laid out a roadmap and you've presented to them. And they say, yeah, go do that. Let's see if we can get some value from that. Now you check in with them frequently for feedback. By the way, control system design. Taught that 5 semesters at the university level, loved teaching it. It's like the biochemistry of engineering, very hard, very math intensive, but it's just for a geek like me and geeks like me, we love that class. It's super hard, but what you learn, if you don't get frequent enough feedback, your system becomes unstable. And all I'm trying to point out with that hyper geeky explanation there is if you don't get feedback frequently from your key stakeholders, you could find your contribution to the business becoming unstable by not really checking in frequently. And so you check in frequently to make sure you're fulfilling the vision they had in their minds and you're course correcting as you go. Now, once you've got those first few helpful things to the business with data, they're going to want to listen to you more. They're going to want to task you more. but it's through getting aligned with those stakeholders that you gain not just business acumen in that domain, but business acumen for that specific business, what they care about. And because you're looking at the data, you're seeing the stories the data's telling, you can then begin to turn around and suggest, hey, might we look at this? Might we look at that? Based on what, here's why I'm saying that, and get them in the habit of making their decisions and their course corrections with data.
Okay. So first kind of pushback is that sounds like more of a soft skills issue than it does an argument for not knowing business domain. Like if I'm talking to a president of a company, I'm not going to talk down to him and dictate. There's kind of a trick to having your ideas. Well, I don't know if I should say this. So in well, see, I'm getting more involved in like leadership roles in the academic space. And what I'm realizing is that the world of academia is a whole lot more political than the world of consulting and entrepreneurship. So I have to present my ideas in a way that it makes it seem like it's actually their idea because there's, I don't know, some egos involved. So I would say, I think that the business acumen though, like I think that from a broader, if we zoom out, I think you should know a specific area of the business and then start building your skills kind of in tandem because it gives you what you're doing. So the math, the analysis, context, so that you kind of develop that critical thinking. I mean, it's kind of like a triangle. Like there's like multiple pillars, and you start to scale it out. So your soft skills, your business acumen, and your analytics hard skills, like you start kind of scaling them out as you get better at communication and like your hard skill. I don't know. It's hard to articulate that.
I sympathize with what you're trying to do here, but my point's actually a lot simpler, and you hit the nail on the head, John David.
Okay.
This is a soft skill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to say, if you go in with an attitude of, I'm here to help you with your problems, they're going to be far more interested in that than if you show up to say, I'm here to talk you into how I think we need to solve our business's problems. And I agree with you too. Once you dive in and you're helping the business with data, well, you're going to develop business acumen for that business. No argument there.
Okay.
But I think we might be saying the same things from different sides of the mountain, actually, because your point about we'll get them to think it's their idea. Well, absolutely. Whether you're just trying to find out what they think's important or you're trying to talk them into what you think's important, but they think it's their idea, I think it could be the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is like one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing kind of out in the analytics learning community like landscape is that people might have good ideas, but they don't get buy-in on their projects. So that really limits the projects that they take on and I would say ultimately their career trajectory.
I got a funny story to help you with what I'm trying to say, and it's a powerful illustration. So in my past, I worked with the Naval Nuclear Program. Now, I was not an ensign, I was not a naval officer, but I went through the same training as a naval ensign in the Naval Nuclear Program and went through the same prototype training. And so I have this giant plant that's a running live replicate of one of the plants on the USS Enterprise, which is now decommissioned. And I had two watch officers for port and starboard because the power plant was so huge and it's mobile. Let's remember that. And they'd bring a problem to me. And I have a lot going on running this plant. So say, what's your idea to deal with that? And if I understood what they were saying, I'd say, go do that. Because that was a lot easier than for me to come up with a solution when I didn't have eyes on and try to get them to understand my solution. They're intimately acquainted with their side of the plant. It's the same spirit. I arrive, I'm wanting to bring data value to this organization, and there's a guy running the plant. And I'm saying, hey, what do you think are the biggest problems here in this area of your business, on this side of the business? How can I help you? they're going to be far more interested in you solving what's causing them to stay up at night, what's causing them to lose their appetite, than what you think. That you're asking them to give you their time to help you with the problem you want to solve for them. That's not as easy a sell as how can I help you? I'll understand your
Yeah.
problem and I'll go start to solve it with data.
Okay, I think that we are just coming at, I see what you're saying about I'm coming from just this side of the mountain and you're on this side, to where you're very technical. And it's funny because I feel like I'm right at like the border of my like technical acumen talking to you. So you learn like math and you're a PhD, to where you built that foundation and then went into the world and started learning like, I guess, use cases and context, to where I learned context first and then built the analytic skills. So, I mean, I guess that's funny that you don't like the dichotomy of data analyst versus business analyst. Because I would say if this is the mountain, technical side, business side, I would say business analysts fall on this side and data analysts fall on that side. So wait, will you unpack why don't you like that dichotomy?
I'll defend why I like not having the dichotomy, and it's this. So there's big thoughts in life. For example, the second law of thermodynamics confuses a lot of people. But I'm like, you're my young friend, John David, and I grab you by the shoulders and I say, don't get caught up in all the math just yet. Let's just remember the second law deals with the quality of energy. And by the way, there's a lot of PhDs out there in the wild that don't remember that fact. I just had a really good advisor that hammered it into my head. Tom, the second law is about the quality of energy. Now let's take that same high level abstraction and bring it down to data science, data analytics. All machine learning problems are math problems. Oh my. Yeah, well, but what about when I have text? You're encoding that text into numbers. Well, what about when you're encoding that into numbers? You're representing it with numbers. But what about you're encoding it or you're representing it as numbers? It's all math problems now. And what I'm trying to say is you have to be really good at understanding that and converting these problems that are in data and converting them to math problems. And so it's that mastery of being able to see, oh, there's a business problem, there's data here. Now, how we start studying, we start visualizing. By the way, my greatest weakness in my career was not visualizing data enough. And guess what? I did really well and passionately in spite of that. I visualized a lot of data. In retrospect, I realized I didn't do it enough. That's why I love people like Kate Strackney and Susan Walsh and other greats that they're data visualization experts. Because even in the machine learning process, as we're learning to convert these problems into math and use math to bring an answer to bear and decoding it back to text when we need to, what's going on? We're just telling a clear story. We're making a clear prediction based on the data. Well, where do those skills apply? Oh, they just happen to apply equally to data analytics and data science. And what was the difference between those two? I'm not quite sure anymore. So that's where I land. Yeah, you're applying it to business, but I just find it still comes down to data.
Interesting. I feel like we are talking in two different contexts. So
Possibly.
I use business analyst and data analyst as I don't know if I'm using this word right, heuristic. So if you are wanting to be a business analyst, you should know case studies, you should study case studies, or even, start your own business or your brand is kind of, we just had Jay on last week, who just got a job at Amazon as an analyst. And he started his own toothbrush company that's a nonprofit. That was awesome that he learned all about the business, to where the reason I make the dichotomy is that if you want to be a business analyst, you should learn these sets of skills. If you want to be a data analyst, I guess it's kind of like a path forward, because I think that there is a distinction on, well, if you're a data analyst, you need to be more math heavy. If you're a business analyst, math is still important, but I mean, honestly, what like some of the biggest projects that I've ever done for clients, like the biggest, I would say, insights I found was just finding a new data source and aggregating data. So it's like I'm in like the kiddie pool when it comes to math.
What you just described there at the end sounded like data science work to me. You know, and let's think about it this way, John David. What about those people that think, oh, I need to rush off to learn deep learning? And you and I might pull them aside and say, I think you and I would say the same thing to them. Well, wait a minute. Are you pretty good at linear regression? Oh, yeah. Well, wait a minute. Do you really understand what L1 and L2 normalization? I mean, do you understand lasso and ridge? Oh yeah, I've heard about those. They seem important. Well, have you applied that? And do you know how to do gradient descent? Do you understand the principles there? And do you understand logistic regression and how it's related to linear regression? And do you understand why scaling is important and why you want to do it? And you're basically walking them through the traditional pipeline of data treatments. Do you understand feature engineering and why we condition the features? And like, well, I don't need to worry about that because deep learning, it does feature engineering automatically. Yeah, but what if your systems can't handle do you have enough data, by the way? I don't know. You know, please, please, you're on that trail. By the way, I think I said this in the pre-show. I'll say it again. The longest hikeable trail in the world is from the tip of South Africa to the east coast of Russia, 14,000 miles, practically speaking, 3.5 years to do it. Data science hiking is farther than that and more beautiful, mentally speaking. The concepts you'll learn, the arts you'll develop, analytically speaking, it's powerful. But if you decide, oh, I'm just going to take a small plane from South Africa to Central African Republic, well, then you missed all that scenery down in the southern part of Africa, and it's beautiful there. And you think now you're just going to appreciate the rest of the hike? Okay, I don't think so. You just robbed yourself. Master concepts, master the basics. And by the way, what does a good business analyst need to do? What does a good data analyst need to do, or whatever we call them, all these names? What does a good data scientist need to do? They need to master the basics. They need to master the concepts before they move into these more advanced topics. And that's what's going to make them be able to do a good job when they encounter a weird problem, because by knowing the concepts, they'll be able to leverage that deeper understanding to do a good job in the times that it's weird.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, because it is a challenge, like as a professor, to present weird problems. I mean, I'm really fortunate in that I pulled two of my consulting clients and I've broken my students into two teams, and they're working on actual real world analytics problems. And because there are weird kind of novel problems coming up. For example, like I just had a meeting today with Christina's team, and we had two different metrics for in stock. So it was in stock and in stock year to date. And it was fascinating watching the students kind of digest what the president of that company was saying, because you're right. There is so much nuance and detail. You just kind of need to slow down and take it one step at a time, because they seemed a little overwhelmed last week when we pivoted into this next phase of the project.
And I could just share funny illustration after funny illustration of why I was so glad I knew the basics and understood the concepts, so I knew how to approach the weird problems. They weren't overly complicated necessarily, but they were just different. They were weird. One of my favorite that stands out is just because I've done it recently and I was really excited the way it turned out. I needed a fast way to find the closest matching document, a new document that comes in, a new technical data sheet. I wanted to be able to rapidly align that to the closest possible match among 60,000+ existing documents. Now I'm going to tell you, the classical file diff programs that you can run programmatically, they're way too slow. And I realized, okay, I'm going to add a new document to this big corpus, and I want it to instantly be ready to be among those that it searches among, so that a new one coming in can match this new growing corpus. Well, I basically did what's very much like a recommendation engine, but without embedding the vectors. I didn't do unsupervised learning on the vectors. I just left it as this gigantic sparse matrix. And it was the sparse matrix routines that saved my bacon. That's why I was emphasizing in the pre-show, I'm glad Molly's focusing on Python right now, because once she gets comfortable with pulling in libraries and modules, she'll always think, oh, let me just go pull in a library or module to help me here. It was just the spirit of having to integrate all this with SQL and doing all that. And I thought, oh, I don't need to embed these vectors. I just need something that can handle the gargantuan size of this matrix in low memory with sparse matrices. And well, now, John David, I can load that corpus in a second and a half, imperceivable compared to the other things the application's loading. And I can find the closest matching document in under half a second. It was a huge win, but it was actually a simplification based on current best practices.
What's fascinating to me is I have no idea what you're talking about.
I am so sorry. I meant for that. Just imagine that
I didn't want to interrupt you because you were so excied, but what's a corpus? I understand unsupervised. Well, no, I think this is fascinating though, because what I tell people is
I could simplify the language. I'm sorry. I did.
Well,
I geeked out on it.
It's funny because I think we're both geeks, arguably, but I'm more of what I tell people is I'm kind of like a management consultant with a little bit of a data pizzazz or flair, to where you are like a hardcore math guy. And what's funny is it's interesting though, because it's intimidating, and it intimidated me a little bit, but Molly was like, I can't even come on this shit. Looking at the messages on LinkedIn, she's like, I don't know what every third word is.
That's not the effect I want to have. Let me simplify it. Basically, it's just numbers. It's occurrence rate of tokens in that corpus matrix. And then it's each document for the columns. So you're just looking at occurrence rates. And so there's going to be a lot of zeros in this giant matrix. I should have made this simpler. Now I tokenize this new document coming in, and I'm letting NumPy do all the heavy lifting. It's just doing looking for which vector in this matrix, these columns are vectors. And now I've turned this new document into a vector. And now I'm just using some simple trig calculations to find out which one's closest. And by the way, I could teach all of you this in an hour. I'm sorry if the words sounded fuzzy. And I think this is one of the disconnects when we're learning the math associated with data science. It's not that the concepts are hard, but the language we use to speak it to one another is part Martian. And it just makes listening to it a little harder. But if we break it down with visuals, you realize, wow, that's simple. It's just not easy. It's simple in that you can understand the concepts, but it's not easy in that the terminology we use and the amount of accounting that has to be done by the way you write the code that does it. That's where it gets a little complicated, but the concepts themselves aren't so hard. It's like going on a hike, and it's got some steep hills along the way. And
right, I would say it's vernacular, and I think that maybe let me rephrase, because I feel like the audience is watching us understand each other. It's like two aliens. What is this person even talking about? What I'm saying with the data analyst, business analyst split, it's two sets of vernaculars. There's KPI, the jargon, but then what is the word you it was a kerbal, I don't know corpus. I've never heard.
Corpus. Oh, a
I think of
group
a
of
dead.
documents.
I
It's
think of
just
a
a
dead
data.
body.
Yeah, it's a body of documents. There you go. It's
Okay,
a body
right.
of documents.
So but I think that understanding the vernacular of both the business world and kind of the data science world is important.
By the way, I could be in a talk with my buddies Dennis Rothman or Marcin Bairds, and to me, they're mathematical titans compared to me. So I know what you're talking about. But I apologize. I was speaking shorthand natural language processing terminology, and I should have slowed down and said, okay, translate from geek, Tom. And I got going just because I was excited.
We're in the math kiddie pool. It's kind of
Me too.
I like that.
Sometimes, many times, I'm in the math kiddie pool.
But okay, so let's bring it back to that main question of how do you become an effective analyst? And let's keep it very high level because we have a mixture.
Sure.
We have a mixed audience.
Here you go, John David. You brought out I remember being in an interview for a management position at a company I was already in, and I didn't know what KPI meant. I just wasn't working in that realm. And as soon as he said it, it made complete sense. But I think, well, is this an interview for the acronyms I know and don't know? You know, and I agree. Being able to hop in and understand that business vernacular right away, it can be challenging for a new business analyst or a data scientist trying to hop over to applying their skills in the business realm. And so, yeah, we can feel it too. Us so-called super geeks can feel like, what the hell are y'all talking about? This is business geek speak now. And it can be hard for us to keep up too.
Awesome. So what makes an analyst effective is what I want to hear from you.
I think being able to work, I think it leads with soft skills. I just can't get around that. You have to be good at finding out what the business most needs and where that intersects with what data's on hand to fill that need. And then, yeah, there's some vernacular to get around. I like the way Dennis puts it. He's just become such a nice friend. And he's a really good mentor, by the way. He says, you know, and I think John Thompson in his book, Building Analytics Team, says this too. You know, we think very non-linearly, us geeks. And when I say geek, I mean that in a positive, good way. Mm-hmm. These business leaders, these business stakeholders, they think very linearly, and it's a good thing that they do. We need to just be like a rack and pinion. The geeks need to be like the pinion operating the rack. By the way, a rack, I'm going back to my mechanical engineering. A rack is like a linear gear, a straight gear. It just has teeth on it. It's straight. And the pinion, it will turn it, or the pinion is a gear that will push that linear. And we just need to connect one point at a time, one tooth at a time, to say, okay, let's go through this project one step at a time, one milestone at a time, and let's be patient with each other's vernacular. And when I hyper geek talk to you, please tell me I did not understand what you just said, so I can begin to learn to translate. But you're right, John David, I see where you're coming from. If I don't have enough business acumen to understand the terminology, it's going to feel like walking through deep snow without snowshoes. It's going to become drudgery for them to feel like they're having to bring me along, and for me to, but then we always have that burden to bring out, to translate geek to linear. But I think both sides need to learn to be patient with each other and gentle with each other as we learn to communicate back and forth.
Well, that's essentially what I do in my consulting agency. So I have clients and I can I can understand their need, and then I will subcontract to data scientists who, so I'm kind of that like in between role of like data translator is kind of the the term that I think is starting to be bandied about. And I think that there's a whole lot of versatility in being kind of that in between space.
No, I'm coming over to see where you were coming from in the beginning. I've been part of efforts where my embarrassingly inability to stop speaking geek and not realize that was the problem was a problem. And hey, we need a translator here. And I think that's a super valuable role to connect the data science and the business when they do have trouble speaking to one another. I love that, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting. I feel like, okay, we've come to an agreement because I feel like we were looking at the same, I guess, occurrence from just different vantage points.
Can you wait a minute? I just got to take my boxing gloves off now. I don't think I need them anymore.
All right. Well, let's move on into, so let's move into the interactive section. And I think we're going to kind of break this into two parts, because the reason that Molly is on the podcast is that Christina had an opportunity come her way. So someone actually saw her on this podcast and said, hey, I like the work that you've done. We're a local nonprofit in Greensboro. Do you want to interview for this position? So it wasn't a good fit for her, but she told me about it. And I was actually like, I wonder if I know anyone. Molly's in town. I've known Molly for years. She's looking for this kind of role. I think kind of maybe we can talk through that a little bit of, Christina, how did they actually reach out to you? Was it through LinkedIn? And then kind of how did that conversation go?
So it was interesting. They saw a post that was one of the posts from How to Get an Analytics Job on LinkedIn about the podcast. So, you know, how you guys do the screenshots of clips from the videos from the podcast episodes. And they saw that and I guess looked at other work I had possibly on Tableau. And then that person happens to work at Greensboro College as an adjunct professor, but that's just kind of like one of his like side jobs. And he told me that his main job is working for this nonprofit, and that he saw my work and told me about this position and thought I would be a good fit for it. That's kind of how it came out.
That is fantastic. And I just love that there are opportunities starting to come like your way or my students' way. Thom, you said something in the pre-interview about it's not the best data scientists or analysts who get the roles, but what was the phrase?
Yeah, no, this is from Lewis Owen. He's quite visible and popular data scientist, brilliant young man from Indonesia, works for World Bank there. And we've become friends and we've done some presentations together, but he just quite brilliantly told me one time as we were talking about these efforts to be good community members on LinkedIn, Thom, I've learned it's not the best data scientists that get the opportunities and roles. It's the most visible ones. But then I was sharing with you over time, I found that the more visible you are, that means you're on a lot of shows talking. By the way, take a lot of encouragement from Christina Stathopoulos for her spirit of, oh, when I'm asked to be on a show, I just do it. And I thought, oh, I love that. And I think I've grown a lot from these interactions on different shows and different keynote speeches I've given, different, I'll just show up and do chats or presentations. I've grown so much from that I would even say by trying to be more visual in a way where you're really trying to help the community have more together, then you just grow, but you're also being more visual and you're getting more opportunities than those that are not as visual.
Right. So it's not about just doing good work or building skills. But doing it in a way that people see. I mean, it's weird. I feel like it's kind of a backdoor thing. This podcast is about personal branding and marketing yourself. And it's like you build your soft skills and your hard skills. That's part of your brand. And then, I mean, I love that this is such a concrete example. And I mean, this podcast isn't huge. I mean, we get probably, I don't know, maybe 700 views an episode. So, and we just hit 4,000, which awesome post on that, Al. So we're not huge by any means, but it's big enough that, I mean, literally Christina, one of my students, had an opportunity, someone proactively reach out to her as opposed to her, you know, having to go through the LinkedIn job portal and apply to everywhere. So I just kind of wanted to pause there and show kind of a linear narrative, I guess, as the business mind of how this works, because people throw the general advice of like, just be active on LinkedIn and network, but that's so vague and nebulous to where that, I mean, that's actually a perfect segue into kind of introing Molly. So, okay, fantastic. Congratulations, Christina, on having an opportunity come your way from, you know, just putting yourself out there and doing good work. But it wasn't a good fit. She told me about it and said, hey, you know, maybe you know someone. And Molly was the first person who came to mind. So that's kind of the value of your network. So if you know people who are very plugged in and well connected, kind of like I've heard this term vector force. I think it was Kevin Kelly who wrote. He was an early tech evangelist, and so I know people who are hiring, and I know people who are looking for jobs. So connecting with me puts you in kind of my network. To where now let's pivot into this is an experimental title, but I think we're going to call it data therapy. So Molly, well, tell us where you're at right now, and we can. My hopes at the end of this segment is that we are going to help you craft an elevator pitch. So I think Thom is a fantastic resource on. He's going to help you understand where you're at currently, what skills you need to develop, and how to develop them. And then also we can talk about you're gonna get that question almost any interview you get into of tell me about yourself. So Molly, where are you at right now?
So right now I do data mining for Syngenta, and, you know, kind of what I've picked up on, you know, at least this last episode on the podcast is that what most people in the data community would call small data. So I don't work with big data. Most of what I'm doing is on Microsoft, Excel, and Access. And my goal is to pivot into, you know, my next or first, I would say, analytics role.
Okay, so good stopping point. Thom, I want your take on this. My intuition. So, I mean, to give you guys context, me and Molly grew up together. We literally got a beer last night and like talked through what we're going to talk about in this podcast. I am telling her that she should brand herself as she does data governance. Is that too much of a stretch? Is that like dishonest? What would you say? What's your take on data mining?
I think data mining's the bomb. It's what we all have to do. And Molly, with every ounce of new knowledge I gain on you, I think you were brilliant for choosing to improve your Python skills first, because you'll get huge returns on that. But I can hear mi hermana Giovanna Regina Galino Malaga telling me, Thom, you need to tell her to speak like the company would. Do everything she can to figure out their lingo and use that. In other words, you want to sell your unique value proposition, but in that company's language. Now, you don't have to be a complete zealot on that. It's just a spirit of, well, does data governance really say what you want to say? And y'all mentioned data therapy. I think using unique terms that really speak to the truth of what you're saying can be very powerful. But let's just remind everyone here, when you're coming up with an elevator pitch, you're essentially trying to say what your unique value proposition is. And this is your opportunity to say things that you can't quite say in your resume. Like, even, by the way, Gio Thana led in our integrated mentoring session this last Saturday, how to do better elevator pitches. And so I had to submit mine and get critical feedback constructively from my family, from my kids there. And it was quite helpful. And they pointed out, you don't need to say what's on your resume. This is your opportunity to say things you wouldn't dare say with resume language. So I like the spirit of data therapist a lot, frankly. But you could sew in. It's kind of like an area of data governance. You could say, I'm not trying to cover all of data governance. It's too big for any one person anyway. I'm trying to cover the area where there's therapy needed. Put a unique twist on it.
Okay, well, so I guess let's give this advice some context. So the opportunity that has come Christina's way that I think Molly is going to soon interview for, or at least reach out to them, is she has started to take over the email marketing and studying our email marketing data to look at times and days. I mean, we can talk kind of through this is so funny because I did not realize that we were going to have this kind of dichotomy of business jargon, because I was going to throw what are the KPIs most important, and I know that's like not the math geek speak, but so I think we should give this advice on what is your elevator pitch for this opportunity. So they want someone who's essentially going to be like a marketing analyst in a very part-time basis for a nonprofit. So how would you go about advising Molly on how to communicate her elevator pitch for that specific context? Because I think if we just say, what's your elevator pitch, that's a little bit too broad. Let's narrow it down to a marketing analytics position in a nonprofit.
You know, I find I'm thinking at a high level first.
Mm-hmm.
I find it quite comical that the PhD who's almost 60 is talking about soft skills, and the very young and talented John David Aronson is talking about, how can you talk to them about your technical skills? You know, about how you're fitting the technical glove they need to fill. And I think they're both important, by the way. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound like such a punt, but I really mean it. Oh, okay. You're talking to the business about, the area of data governance, that's data therapy, that's, data mining and getting it cleaned. Have you talked to John David yet? I would probably do that, because my business terminology can be weak unless it's in the realm of real estate and real estate investing. Again, so much of my background's been engineering focused. So that's my geek speak area. Boy, that was such a punt though, wasn't it?
All right, Molly, are you ready to be put on the spot?
I'll try.
Okay, so we had a call. I called you on the way over here. Mm-hmm. Do you have like at least a start to an elevator pitch currently?
So, obviously I'm not going to change topics, but I know that we spoke about like this crossroads that I'm at. This is I'm looking for a career transition. So I am definitely still struggling on my data elevator pitch.
Okay.
And, what would I put in there that I wouldn't put on my resume specifically? I heard Thom talk about data matrices. I've used data matrices in my current position. So, how I'm going to word that is I guess the goal, but that's interesting that would be a good thing to throw out there.
Let's just talk, Molly, just friend to friend here. What do you already have in hand? Can you read it?
So I can't say that I know what like my boss speaks that, this is the data matrices, and then I will go in there and then I'm kind of nitpicking within it. I'm not building a matrices by any means, but so I'm working with that. And then I do a lot of Excel and then a lot of Access. And then, on my own time, I've been working on trying to pick up things on Orange, which is an data mining software, and then Python, a little bit of SQL and Tableau. I wouldn't say that I'm at the point that I'd throw that on my resume or put that in my elevator speech at the moment.
Sure. So I think what I would advise is if you understand the business needs, you're looking for the intersection where your skill set can best help them where they are. And that's what you focus on for an elevator pitch with that company.
Okay. Yeah, and this one in particular, I know, database management is what they're looking for.
There you go. And are they hoping to get someone, this is just a shot in the dark, are they hoping to move their Excel and Access data into more of a SQL database?
The company that I work with currently.
Oh, the company you want to go work with.
That's a good question. That's not something that I know about yet, based off of the job description.
What would you say are your top 3 skills currently in working with small data, the way you've described it? Or even top 1 or 2?
Mm-hmm. I'd say that I'm very good with Excel. I know it's very multifaceted and there's a lot to be done with Excel, and attention to detail is something that is very important in my current position.
I would highlight those things, and then don't be afraid to say, I have a learning plan and I've triaged it, and this is what I'm going for next, because in this role, which is a role like the one I would want to get, I would think I'd need to learn this. And by the way, I'm curious what you would say. That shows them that you don't have it all figured out, which none of us do, by the way, and that you're willing to learn what you need to learn to take your skill set to the next level to do that job well.
Okay. Yeah. And as far as, skills for this particular job, I guess that's where the how to get a data analytics job, experience comes in, running their email marketing campaign. Because, I guess they are looking for social media presence as well as database management, kind of switch from one hat to the other within the same position.
Yeah. And highlight, those skills that you currently have that best overmap with their current needs. I like the way Jonathan Tesser will say this in some of his posts. You're trying to get a job here. We're bleeding in points. That's why we're hiring someone. Prove to me you can solve our problems. And you want to go in there with either a passion to show I can put Band-Aids on these wounds, but I can go learn what I need to learn to put Band-Aids on these other wounds that you've got. That's basic. That's why we use this triage term. It's very much like a war hospital, and you're out there, okay, who's closest to death? We need to work on them next, and treat the business that way.
Yeah, I like the way that you say that, and that reminds me of how I've heard people say, they're not just interviewing you, you are interviewing the company as well to make sure that that is the fit for you.
So important. Now, Molly, I'm going to do something John David does. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
All right.
How is your online portfolio building coming? You can't build it in a day, but are you building it steadily?
Yeah, slowly but surely. I'm actually working on my first Python project right now. I've got a GIS project that I've worked on back whenever I was doing my undergrad. And then I have just a tiny little Tableau project posted.
Excellent. And how are you sharing that with the world? Is it on a GitHub repo? Are you sharing your journey in LinkedIn posts?
Through LinkedIn.
Okay.
Through LinkedIn.
Just one caution, just a little caution. I would encourage you to keep your code on GitHub, have a nice README file, just improve it a little bit over time, and then find a place to take the summation of those posts on LinkedIn and put them on. LinkedIn's great, but you want them somewhere where they have a longer half-life.
Okay.
A post on LinkedIn is a short half-life, but if you have it like as a blog post somewhere, that can be found forever.
Yeah, Molly, what we talked about in the last podcast episode is actually, so you can have your GitHub and your Tableau Public featured on your LinkedIn profile. I mean, it all gets back to personal branding, which I did want to interject. you don't have a tiny little Tableau project. And I think that this is a theme that I wanted to unpack with you is I think you have imposter syndrome. I think that you are a badass in your own right. And you
Most likely.
constantly, yeah, I feel like you constantly like, you make yourself small and like, I don't know, meek is the term that's coming to mind. And I think that you just need to own it. Like if they're looking for someone who is working part-time as an analyst, I mean, that's a very small pool of people who would even consider getting that job. And I think that you need to puff your chest out and say, I'm here, you know, I'm currently running the email marketing for a podcast. I mean, maybe, and it's funny because like when we were hanging out last night, I have delusions of grandeur. I have the complete opposite problem that you have, to where like I need like gut punches and like I need to be brought down to earth because I will just, my head will get so big it won't fit through the door.
I have an idea for you, Molly.
Okay.
Take what the way John David is and take the way I am and meet it in the middle. Just say, I want you to know I'm extremely passionate about this area. Now, it may be that in that area you are a true badass, but it may be you're afraid to say I'm a badass because you know someone else that's a bigger badass than you and
Right.
someone that's a bigger badass than them, right? You circumvent all that by just saying, I'm really passionate about this area. That's what gets my juices flowing. Then you're not bragging. You're just sharing your passion.
Yeah, and that interest to learn, I hear, goes a long way. That's another thing that I've picked up on previous episodes too.
Yeah, and also too, like you're doing legitimate work. You are managing the podcast email marketing. You need to own that. Because I think that a lot of the people applying for that job probably have zero experience actually managing these tools and these platforms. And also too, like we're working on this together where you're looking at, well, actually, let's put you on the spot here. We've talked about this extensively. I'm gonna go into character here. I am now interviewing you for the marketing analytics position. So Molly, I see that you have some experience on your resume here about email marketing. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I do run the email marketing campaign for the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. I use a platform called MailChimp, and the biggest indicators that I'm looking at are the open and click-through rate of the emails. So, my goal is to find the best time of day to send them out and find the most catchy title to, boost engagement within the live chat and the listening rate of the podcast as a whole.
There you go. I think that was pretty good. I mean, you might want to say like, we discussed off air, we A/B split test. I love that. Like we experiment with different approaches and we're continually learning and dialing in just what the audience needs. I mean, I can just kind of rattle this stuff off, but I mean, you did it. You talked about, the KPIs, the open rate and the click-through rate. And that's, and I mean, Christina, we actually talked about this last semester, didn't we?
Yeah, so we did 2 different email marketing campaigns and we were kind of introduced to those exact terms and how to create a campaign that would, give a good outcome.
Right. Man, Christina, your audio is like really weird right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with my
Oh, no worries. But yeah, I think that, Molly, I think you did a fantastic job of explaining the project, but also kind of the broader context of that is if you guys who are listening either as a podcast or out on YouTube, you can go and find these opportunities. Like if there's a nonprofit in your area, or I mean, Jay in that last episode said, just start your own brand. I mean, you can start your own podcast, your own LinkedIn page and start looking at those engagements and playing around. And then you are a marketing analyst. I mean, Thom, actually, I want to get your opinion. I guess that's not necessarily, you're not technically a marketing analyst, but you could say you have marketing analyst experience.
Yeah, I was going to just add, I loved what John David was saying, but I was thinking of something quite a bit more elementary, and that is, okay, now think of all the different ways you can say you're passionate about something. I'm passionate. I love, I really like to, this excites me. But again, it's maybe not your badass list. It's your, what you want to be a badass at, and that you really want to grow in those areas, and you've enjoyed bringing value. You've enjoyed bringing value to your current activities, and you're looking for opportunities to challenge yourself. There's always a really good way to spin something that's easy to everyone's ears that makes you, by the way, I got to share something with you, Molly, that is probably super key when you're having these conversations. And I'm really eager to hear if John David agrees with this. So when I was in that naval nuclear program and I'd had to sit on these very difficult boards in front of Naval Reactors Commission, and they're intimidating, I was the nervous guy. I was the most nervous guy among all our guys. And one day I was going up for one of the highest qualifications I'd gotten yet. And they asked a question that I knew I'd blown early on. And so I just decided I failed. And I just completely relaxed and thought, I'll just practice. I just gave my best answers going through. My manager comes out very quickly after review and said, Thom, that is the highest score anyone's ever gotten on one of these. I went, what? I thought I failed. Well, all that had happened was me relaxing made all the difference. So any mental trick you can play with yourself to stay relaxed, do it. And I'm happy to share many of those tricks with you offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it reminds me of this quote. I can't remember what author said this, but it was, I've known a lot of worry in my life, but most of it's just been in my head or something along those
That's
lines.
so good. And one of Dale Carnegie's most famous books, How to Stop Worrying and Stop Living. Of course, he's the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People. But yeah, Molly, one trick I try to use too nowadays is, they might already have made up their mind who they're going to hire. So I'm just here to do the best job on this interview I can and learn from it, because there's a good chance I won't even get the offer. There could be two other candidates better than me. I could have the interview of my life, but there's just still someone with better background knowledge. So you just try to play every mental trick you can to stay as relaxed as possible in the interview. And that translates to the interviewers in more powerful and effective ways than we can completely comprehend or appreciate.
Awesome. So in this interactive section, we've talked about how Christina got the opportunity, the value of networking. Molly comes into the picture. Molly's elevator pitch, her personal brand. Let's close out this section on steps forward. So the conversation that me and Molly have had off air has been, she's studying Python. I personally advise, I think that she should stop studying that and get the Google, is it Google Analyst or Google Analytics certificate through Coursera?
I couldn't tell you exactly. I think it's analytics.
Molly, I bet by getting that certificate, you're still going to be using Python a lot in that course. Just a thought.
They use R, Thom.
Dun, dun, dun.
How similar
No, I'm
are
sorry
R and
to my R
Python?
friends. I love R. I just use Python. It's
Dave
what I
Langer's on another webinar doing some talk about the wonders of R.
He's such a pirate. He's always going around saying R. No, maybe find a certificate that uses Python. I don't know. No, I'm just saying, because then you leverage what you already know. You're already into Python, and there are certificates you can get that you would use Python. It could be that they have a Python track too. I've seen that.
Thom, their IT cert, the other Google, they have 4 professional certs. The IT one uses Python. But yeah, the data analyst goes from, he teaches you Excel, SQL, R, and Tableau.
One of my key advisors for my career that I check in with periodically is he's a cloud architect expert. And he was the one that said, you know, Thom, you've done a lot of data science, but you've never had a data science role title. Do you think you might enjoy getting the EDX certification in data science from Microsoft? And I said, I love to do courses like that. Well, you know, I thought I was just going to breeze through it. And I did, but it covered things like ethics and storytelling. It covered Power BI, which is much like Tableau. And I was just thrilled that I got exposed to those things. And then it was just reaffirming to see that, oh, yeah, okay, I knew this other stuff, but it's good to put it in a formal project with data types that I don't normally work with. So, you know, check other programs is all I'm trying to say, but it's no harm to learn R. It's just, I'm trying to think, reduce your learning burden and get through to a certification as quickly as possible. I'm not anti-R, by the way. I'm just, if you're already learning Python, boy, if you could find a cert like John David's talking about, and it was based in Python, that would be nice. But there's definitely some things R is better for. I'm just so glad that you can pull R and Shiny in through Python now, for example, because it's very good.
Actually, a follow-up question to that of, you know, I think that her continuing to take online courses in Python or maybe get this Google certification, do you think she should go to grad school? Like what are the pros and cons from your perspective on that?
So if I were the hiring manager, a killer portfolio with a lot of good online activity, community involvement would speak higher to me than a graduate degree. However, if you had a graduate degree and you were doing all those things, now that you've covered all your bases. And that's what I tell people, okay, if you can't stomach going to get an advanced degree, just show that you're working step by step, careful step through your online portfolio to becoming a really strong person. In other words, it's your own self-appointed degree program. But why do those advanced degrees from good institutions matter? Bonification. I hate it that it's that way, but you're bona fide. But it doesn't mean you know everything.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What's bonified?
Bona fide. Oh, sorry. It's an old world term for, you know, it's your sheepskin. It's your clout. You know, you've proven yourself. Oh, if you can get a master's degree with areas in data science or focused around data science arts, you clearly, you know, they respect that. That's kind of a rite of passage.
Hmm.
It's not to say that you can't come across a great expert that doesn't have an advanced degree. It's just easier to verify.
Okay. Yeah, it's signaling theory. If it's a costly signal to acquire, it's
Yes.
costly in time, effort, and also it's really expensive monetarily. So it means you're pretty serious. Well, fantastic. I think that was some really good advice. Molly, you have any questions? Oh, you got more?
I just want to add one thing. There's a blog post that I wrote with my daughter Manpreet Putraja and Abdul Abjib on being a data scientist. Now, we could have even just titled it Being a STEMite, meaning someone in the STEM arts. But for those of you that may feel crushed because you heard this statement about advanced degree, it's not dead just because of that. Think of, you want to always be the person you want to become, and you do what that person would do, then eventually you'll have that role title. In other words, don't feel like you have to start out with the title to be someone. You just be that person regardless of the job you have. So Molly, let's say you get this job, great. Let's say you don't get this job. Keep improving your ability to use data to make a difference in whatever role you're in, because that's being who you want to become. And make sure you state that clearly and concisely on your growing resume. Make sure you make that clear in your growing online portfolio. Then when you can and you have the inclination and the time and the money, yeah, if you want to go get an advanced degree, do. And it will enhance you and help you. But don't think it's the answer to everything either. It's not.
That's great advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. All right, so it's 2:56. Christina, you got any questions? You got 4 minutes before class is officially over.
So my question is kind of going back to how you were talking about, well, debating, I guess is the word, debating over the whole like data scientist versus data analyst, and how much you should like try to implement the business side versus the more technical mathematical side. And now talking about like grad school, a guy, for example, was looking at getting a master's in business analytics. And then I remember, was it Tina who suggested like, oh, why don't you get one in data science? So I come from a math background. I'm a math major. And sometimes I do find like that we do kind of go into like more of the business side of it. But like trying to get like a data analyst role, what do you think would be more beneficial to a data analyst? Like maybe like a data science degree or a business analytics degree? Like how do you balance the two sides?
I really don't have an answer to this, but I can tell you how I'd go about getting the answer. I would talk to companies that you would like to work for and ask, does it make a difference? Do you have a preference? I think that's key. I don't even really have a feel. Please remember, I have 3 degrees. None of them are in data science. So I had to prove myself a data scientist from years of work. They might have said, so what, you have a PhD, can you do data science work? Well, yeah, I've been doing it here. I started learning data science before it was called a data science, but I have to prove that every time. I have to explain it in a way that doesn't sound defensive or combative or, whatever. But the world's changed so much from when I was your age, Christina, but the techniques haven't completely changed. Find out what's most respected at the companies you most are interested in working at. And you can possibly do that through LinkedIn connections with those companies. But sometimes you can just call HR, because let's face the new reality. Your resume still has to get through their automated screening routines. Well, which degrees work better? Maybe they work equally. And John David, I'm curious what you would say. What's more versatile? Is it data scientists or business analysts? What's more versatile in the world
What's
of
more
business?
versatile?
In the world of business type roles?
I think that it's probably what's more versatile, which is probably going to surprise you. I think that getting a data science degree, it's easier to learn business than it is to get a business degree and learn data science, I would say. I think that it's just kind of, I don't know. There's less, having an advanced math foundation. Well, it's kind of like the Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak differential, like having someone develop versus someone to sell. It's easier to teach sales to an engineer than engineering to a salesperson. So I think that, I think that would be the more versatile, but at the same time, if you're not interested in math, it's going to be really difficult. You might drop out. So go ahead.
With your math background, Christina, and leveraging from what John David was saying, which I think is excellent points, is do this. Go ahead and go for data science, but as you build that portfolio, show that you have a keen interest in business problems. Now you get a wide spectrum that way, and you take advantage of your advanced math background.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Actually, my advice though is go work for a while. Don't go directly from undergrad to grad school.
Agreed.
I think
good.
that my first intuition was to say, well, reverse engineer the jobs that's your dream job. But knowing you, I don't think you even know if you want to do business analytics or data analytics or data science. So I think get some experience, you know, because what's funny is I think the first job out of college is really rough for most people now. I think that's becoming the norm. So
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people coming on the podcast. How they're like, oh, well, my first job was this and I didn't like it. And I think I needed to hear that from so many people, because I kind of have this grand expectation of like, okay, I'm going to finally get a job and I'm going to love it and it's going to be wonderful. But I'm like, okay, it could be like that, but probably isn't going to be hearing what other people have said.
yeah, you're brace yourself. You're about to have your quarter life crisis. So, so, well, I mean, I had it. I mean, I sold insurance door to door for the first 3 years of my, like, I guess, post-college career. And I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do, which is a very good thing to know, because then it kind of guides your decisions moving forward.
Right. I was having a little PTSD when Thom was talking about the thermodynamics, because when I first got into college, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. So I was taking all these physics and I took thermodynamics, and that's what made me think, nope, this is not for me.
I can appreciate that. I can. But I think John David's right. It's certainly okay to iterate. And if you take a job you don't like, just still do the best you can, grow the most you can. This was a mistake I made, by the way. Still do your best in that until you find your next gig. But understand, you're gaining important life skills in that role, even if it's a toxic environment, even if it's really grunt work. If you're just still trying to do your best all the time, you're growing, you're getting prepared for the next step.
Yeah, you might have to professionally kiss a few frogs before you find your brand new job. All right. Okay, so class is officially over. Christina, you're free to go unless you have any more questions. Molly, do you have any questions?
Thank
I think
you.
I've asked everything. Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Awesome. Well, you guys are free to go. Al, it's your turn to step up to the bat. Are you ready to host the Q&A section?
Always ready, born ready.
Awesome. You guys and your backgrounds are hilarious today.
I've got a weird lighting situation back here. There's a window right behind me. It's a bad look. So, and plus the people watching the channel expect me to have to be in weird and wild locations. So I'm in the same spot for 2 straight weeks. So I had to do something creative.
And my wife won't let me use my real background currently. You know the story on that.
Yeah, is that the dog we hear in the background?
Yeah, sorry for her.
Okay.
She's ruling the household.
All right, it makes the podcast approachable, I think.
Excellent.
So Thom, we've got, usually we limit it to 5. I honestly don't even know how many questions we have. I've grouped them in some sort of strange way. I probably should have put it in SQL and grouped it in some sort of sensible fashion. So we have some weird questions and some normal questions, and then we have a lightning round. So yeah, I'm a poor analyst today. I couldn't even tell you how many we have, but are you ready?
I'm ready.
I won't be able to give you a score at the end because everyone else gets 5 questions. You got 9-ish. I don't know.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Alrighty. So we've got some new question askers this week. So I'm going to try and get all their names right. The first one is Siddish Bongle or Bangle. Not sure. I forgot to ask him how to pronounce that. But anyway, his first question is, do you think that a data analyst job can be or will be automated in the near future?
No. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about machinists. The mills and lathes used to be completely manual. Now they're computer numerical controlled. There's still a lot of setup, and you need to know what you're doing when you set that up. I think the expertise of a data scientist is going to need to be as rigorous, possibly more, as we get into things like auto ML and auto NLP. But trust me, no matter how much we automate these things, that does not mean we don't still need expert operators of those things. And quite frankly, there's still a lot of specialized tasks that come along. Let me use another example from history. When robotics came, that didn't mean we did away with human operators. We needed expert operators to program and maintain and do maintenance on those robots. And these systems, even if they're auto ML or auto NLP or whatever the auto du jour is, they still need expert human monitors. Think of AI as our friends, but they're always individual contributors. They're not managers.
Got it. So Siddhish also wanted to know, and I think we've kind of covered this, but I'll give you a chance to throw out any saved rounds. Is it worth pursuing a master's in data science or data analytics?
Absolutely. But I just want to stress, like what John David was saying, get out and work. You know, get a role closest to data. Just because you don't have a data science role doesn't mean you're not a data scientist. Apply data science as much as you can in that role. Don't shirk your main, role needs. Do really good in those, but enhance them with data. There's almost always a way to do your job better with data and data analytics and data science, whatever you want to call it. Even just good visualizations of data on hand can help you do your job better and help you help the company more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the next one we got kind of a three-headed monster. So it's Pooja Chavan. I'm not calling them monsters. Pooja Chavan, the Data Mom, STR, and Shaliprithika Mani. And so I've kind of grouped their questions together because they're very similar. So what prompted you to pivot from being a mechanical engineer to being a data scientist?
So I love getting this question so I can repose it. I did not pivot. I want to remind everyone, I did my first least squares problem in physics lab in 1980. I was coding in 1981, started on punch cards and Fortran. Then we went to terminals in that same semester, thank God, and meaning no love of punch cards. But I was in love, making functions, reusing them. We were pushed to use good coding techniques from way back then. Even though I was doing more modeling in the physics realm, every time we did what we called empirical modeling, we were doing a form of data science. We were doing experiments. That means we had our own way of collecting data, and we were coming up with mathematical models that fit that data. And that gets into very powerful arts. In fact, all physics first principles are built on principles of data science. For example, coming up with a spring constant. Well, that's just the slope of the curve for force versus stretch in a spring. We start from data science principles, even when we're using multi-physics modeling and control system design. So what happened when data science became a term was after I started studying expert systems, fuzzy logic, neural networks in grad school. And why did we study those things? Because we saw that traditional modeling methods got more and more complicated as the system got more and more complex, but offered very little additional return compared to doing things like expert systems, or in other words, empirical type modeling, data science type methods. So that's why you see even the engineering arts are embracing things like artificial intelligence, reinforced learning, etc. So
That's funny.
it wasn't really a transition as much as it was, oh, I need to shift my skill sets more over into the empirical realm. And oh, by the way, this empirical realm is exploding with new techniques and abilities. Well, I better go amp up my education in those areas. But because of that previous conceptual knowledge, it's not as hard for me to adapt new things. But I'm here to tell all the young people out there, when you get to be older, that ease of taking on new things will be easier for you than me because you were born into it. I'm jealous of you guys. You're going to see a much more advanced world than we will.
So I was going to say, it's funny that I don't know if you remember 2 weeks ago, Matt Bratton said something very similar about finance, which is, about as different from engineering as you can get, other than being like a studio artist. But just saying, hey, I didn't pivot into data science. I was always doing this stuff. It's just a whole different name now, and I'm not a money man. I'm doing the numbers on the money purely.
And there is a little bit of a difference. Like when I'm doing a big physical system, I'm predicting the way it's going to behave before we prototype it, using massive amounts of differential equations and theoretical control systems before we built them. That is different, but it's a very close cousin. And the principles, there's many times we have to resort to empirical models, which is basically the engineering form of data science.
Yeah. So Shelley Prithika actually is also coming from the engineering field. And so she was asking, what are the things that I think she's back in school, what should she do to successfully transition from engineering and so school in India, I believe, and couldn't quite suss out what kind of engineering she's going into or is involved in.
So if she focuses on her physics-based modeling skills, that's good prep. Just in other words, seek specializations in your engineering degree that deal with predictive analytics, modeling, simulation, um, doing that with computer programming, differential equations. But as you keep going, um, it will be easy for you to, and you probably will, make sure you're learning linear regression, getting really good at it. We don't typically think about classification much in the engineering arts, but that's not a big jump. You going from linear regression to logistic regression is not a big jump. And then once you're really good at all the techniques you can do with those two things, those are the bricks for neural networks. And once you've really understood, okay, this is how I derive back propagation for a small network. Okay, I see the patterns involved. Okay, now, yeah, it's cool to let the libraries do this for me. Now, understanding different neural networks, once you really understand all the intricacies of building and training neural networks, it's not going to be as hard to learn graph neural networks and all the various types of neural networks, and then even to make a jump to transformers. But I can tell you this, even though it's not impossible to learn, reinforced learning, such a strange animal. It's a beautiful animal, but it's strange. That one, be patient and gentle with yourself is all I could say, but it's worth learning.
Yeah, not quite there yet, but we'll get there.
Oh, I can appreciate that.
So another name I always screw up, Alok Chilka.
Oh, hey, Alok. Alok.
Yeah, Alok. Hey, learning. So he posed a similar question to the one that Dennis Rothman answered the other day. And what he asks is, when it comes to deciding the priorities and order amongst tasks on a project, how do you use a decision matrix, or do you use another decision support tool to hash that out?
So this is great. And I wished we could have covered it when John David and I were talking. I encourage everyone out there to learn how to use decision matrices. By the way, Greg Kikuyo and I are trying to do a blog post on how to do them. But before we write ours, there's other good posts and articles out there on how to build and use decision matrices. But Alec, one thing I would tend to do, your business stakeholders trump your decision matrix. So learn decision matrices, use them. It's basically options versus aspects. What are important aspects to my decision? What are the options that I'm deciding among? And then you start weighting things and doing some clever calculations. By the way, decision matrices are one of the key tools within the Lean Six Sigma tool set. So it's not just me preaching them. My PhD advisor encouraged me to use them for a project, and that's when I first learned it. But I just went off and learned it on my own after he mentioned it. They're not hard to learn for someone that knows spreadsheets, is what I'm trying to say. But again, you might use that decision matrix with one of your key stakeholders, but you don't want to build that without a key stakeholder giving their input too. It comes back to the non-debate debate that John David and I had during the show.
We can call it a debate. You guys were just nice to each other. That's all.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
So, okay, so we're into the lightning round. You ready?
Yeah.
We got to keep these quick.
Okay.
Let's put some imaginary limit on the clock here. Okay, so we got 4 lightning round questions.
Okay.
All right. Ali Abdallah Abd Al-Latif. Swore I was going to get that right. Okay. He asked, what is the one thing you wish you knew before you became a data scientist? And you can define that time frame any way you want. Go.
The incredible importance of soft skills, even if you think you already have them.
Got it. Gio's smiling somewhere. Okay. Michael Simpson, you knew this question was coming because you read it on the post. You said you already had an answer, so it should be easy. If you were a new data analyst and you had to focus on one thing, what would that one thing be? Technical skill, soft skill, or any other skill? What would it be and why?
It's a one-word answer: care. Care about the business you're serving. Don't go out and create your baby. Create solutions that the business said they care about what they care about.
Okay. So you asked about what do you think is the best way to learn that? I think he was probably expecting something a little more kind of firm and tangible than, I don't know that that's even a soft skill. That's kind of a characteristic or trait, but how could you develop that? That's probably a better question for Gio, honestly.
So right here, I'm staring at my array of monitors. Unless I'm on a call like with you, this is the worst place to be to get that done. I'm speaking kind of old world. Get off your butt and go talk to people. Go out to lunch with people. Pay for the lunch. It's worth it. Pay for the coffee. Go out after hours. Basically get face to face with people or Zoom to Zoom with people and find out what they're worried about and start thinking, how can I become their hero? How can I show them that data and data analysis and data science is their hero?
Okay, like it. Okay, so you ready for the weird one? We started ending with a curveball. This one's weird. Okay, so Siddish Bengal, he's gonna open and close the show. All right, there's a rumor going around that only people with PhDs are hired as data scientists. True or false?
False.
Okay,
Is that enough?
I think so. Have you heard that one? I hadn't heard it.
You know, I've had friends at Amazon tell me, oh, they like to hire PhDs.
Yeah.
I went, okay, but that didn't mean they don't hire masters or bachelors. I think it depends on your background and if you have a killer resume with a lot of data science and data analysis history, I don't think Dennis Rothman has a PhD.
Yeah.
Does anyone think Dennis Rothman isn't as smart as me or possibly smarter? I think
Andrew Jones has a psych BA. That's it.
exactly. There you go. That's a great point. And I'm not sure. I think Danny does have a master's, Danny Ma, but I'm not sure. He may have a bachelor's, but they can prove themselves.
I was gonna say, Jay Sueno just got hired at Amazon. He doesn't have a PhD.
There you go.
Does Jay even have a master's?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think
I think it's just a whole portfolio.
Well,
By
yeah.
the way, I think sometimes having a PhD, depending on the role, depending on the company, depending on the group, has sometimes hurt me.
Well, what's the saying? It's mile deep and an inch wide.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, John David, I wondered if I was shooting myself in the foot, but I loved going deep, but I didn't want to stay in that hole. I kind of liked being a generalist.
Well, what is the I keep hearing this term like T-shaped skill set. There is a wasp in this room.
So I got gnats.
No, that's okay.
I'm freaking out. No, T-shaped, where it's like you are a generalist, but you have. So I technically fall into that trope in that I'm really deep into data visualization, but I also, know how to manage projects. I know how to do marketing analytics, sales analytics, supply chain, all that.
I think if you look at someone's skill set, it tends to,
right,
look like this because you had to go deep sometimes.
That's true. Cool. Well, Al, that's the last question, right?
Round's complete. I'm done.
Okay, I'm a little disappointed, John David. You've had a reputation of putting people on the spot, and I think that only thing that happened is maybe I unintentionally put you on the spot once. So
Well,
I don't know. I'm a little disappointed here.
I got you to admit that you're wrong. I think that
Partially,
you
yeah.
said you came around.
Yeah,
It
because of the
was a
you
long
need to
con putting you on the spot.
you need to know the language is what I think. Yeah, with the business analyst, I agree.
You did
that
incorrectly assume that Google was using Python for their data analyst cert.
yeah, that I guess that indirectly put me on the spot, but that was Molly.
That's
That's
true.
okay.
Molly was the on the spot getter today.
Okay. Well, I'll accept that. I was put on the spot there.
And this is an interesting, like, I think this is kind of a preview of what the summer sessions are going to look like, kind of doing this data therapy. Like we'll have an expert come on, we'll have someone trying to make a career transition, and then they get to talk directly to an expert. Because I realize I have these kinds of conversations all the time, and I don't know why I'm not just broadcasting them out so other people can learn.
You know, I've come up with a new definition of expert as people call me an expert. They're still thriving in their career after many, many years and they haven't died. I think that's my new definition of expert.
Wait, see, I have called myself an expert. I call myself an analytics expert, but that you're right. There's always a bigger fish. There's always someone who's like better than you. So I don't know. It's funny because I don't have imposter syndrome.
Jeffrey Hinton was a relatively young man when he developed backpropagation. I hope this isn't offensive to Jan, but I think Jan LeCun was still kind of a kid when he developed CNNs. When I was getting my PhD, I was 35-ish. So and at that point, I still would say at that point, I was probably one of the world's top experts at hybrid electric vehicle power plant modeling, which I just loved. It was a passion. I think that's how I got there. I don't mean to brag. It was what I was doing. But I think in the sense of data science, wow, when you look at how fast it's growing and how clever it's growing, in spite of what I would say our hardware limits are, no one person can keep up with it all. And you have to choose wisely what you're learning. That's why I have such a big emphasis on concepts.
Right.
You master the concepts, then you can learn the things you need to learn easier than if you're trying to memorize details and be very, by the way, I loved Robin Hunt's tool agnostic, almost
Right.
tool apathetic. So what? You're an expert in that tool. Do you know the concepts? What if that tool goes away and is replaced by a new tool? Can you learn that new one fast? That's what's important to me for myself.
Right. We're actually putting together a video on this about Tableau, Power BI are competing with each other.
Right.
Why tie yourself to one of them, either winning or losing? Because then let's say Power BI takes over the entire market.
Now,
and
just to
Tableau's
keep you from making Christina mad, Google Data Studio also, right? Uh-oh, you went there. She's a tall Greek woman. I'm not messing with her.
No, well, okay.
I can't imagine her mad.
That's true.
Oh, man, that's funny. I mean,
She got mad at
Christina
you?
and I are buddies. No. We're buddies. And we've even had, some fun DMs with each other, but there's something about her. I'm like, I'm not pissing her off. No way. I don't cross that line.
Google Data Studio. I do have some experience. Tableau and Power BI are the two main tools that what's funny, this is so weird, and I feel like I've said this multiple times. I'm well known. I just looked at one of my LinkedIn courses just broke 100,000 learners, and I've got
awesome.
8 of them, which is weird in that I can relate to you where it's like, I'll joke with Molly, and Molly's like, I want to get an analytics job. And I'm like, you're literally at the bar with like a globally recognized analytics expert who trains people to get analytics jobs. And I'm like making fun of myself because like that's like me having a huge head on my, I'm being self-deprecating when I say that. Because there are people who are way way bigger than me.
There's always someone bigger.
True. But I'm like more well known as the Power BI guy, but I do all my consulting work in Tableau. So it's such a
Interesting.
weird, funny, my public facing people know me as that, but really, but I mean, Tableau and Power BI are pretty much you can swap them out. I don't think you can do the same with Google Data Studio though. I don't know anyone who's using Google Data Studio as their analytics infrastructure for their
You know,
organization.
I'll share a quick story about this, why I'm tools apathetic. Back in the day when I was doing really heavy duty multi-physics modeling and simulation, I was using both Axel, which probably no one's heard of in the show, and MATLAB and Simulink, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. They were both great. I had a slight preference for Axel. Just it was more Fortran-y or Linuxy, I don't know. But I could get the job done with either one. What did it matter? You know, and so when people, well, do you know TensorFlow, and can you understand the new Keras front end, and or do you know PyTorch? I'm like, do you really think someone with this skill set can't learn that? You should be focusing on, do they know the concepts? Can they learn new tools quickly? Because again, look at the big change we had from TensorFlow 1.0 to 2.0 when they decided, hey, let's put the Keras front end on there, which was a stroke of brilliance, by the way, because it's very intuitive. But well, you had to learn TensorFlow all over again. But did anyone let that stop them? No. That's what I'm trying to get at.
You just reminded me. I did put you on the spot when I said I have no idea what you're talking about. You need to dumb it down.
Oh, you did.
That I did put you on the
I
spot.
felt quite embarrassed for geek speaking. You know,
Well,
I was. Oh no, I really chide myself when I haven't realized I just did a geek monologue, and I didn't speak to the general audience. In fact, I even point out, don't present to data scientists, present to non-data scientists, and I failed. So you did. You got me on the spot.
Well, it was kind of cute because you're just so like passionate about it, and I can see it. It's just you're just dripping with like a kid in a candy shop. Like, oh, and then this happened, and then TensorFlow's update. I'm like, I don't even know what TensorFlow does really.
Yeah, I know. It's just it's a cool module library for doing data science work that Google came up with.
Right. I think
and PyTorch comes from Facebook.
Okay. So I'm used to talking. I came up with the kiddie pool. I'm in the math kiddie pool. I came up with that literally on the spot during this podcast. Well,
that was perfect.
Because executives want you to speak. It's like kindergarten level. It's like, this is bigger than this, so we should go with this marketing campaign. And it's like there's a very economy of verbiage. And what's funny, because I tend to just kind of ramble on this long form podcast, but when I'm in meetings, it's very punchy and specific.
By the way, I'm just curious. Are we still in the show?
We are.
Oh, that's cool. I just didn't know because it seems like it's gone long. I hope people don't mind how long.
Well, so we've been doing like hour and a half podcast episodes.
Okay.
And I mean, this one might be a little bit, I don't know. This will probably be an hour and 15 maybe. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad.
Maybe this will be a 2-hour one.
Now we're at an hour and a half.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. All right.
But this is fun to talk about because I'm sure all three of those visualization tools, but I enjoyed learning Power BI. And the thing that I learned when I was done, oh, I'd still rather do this with Python and Plotly and things like just Avery Smith and I could be just the worst for each other because we think exactly the same. When I listen to him talk, I'm like, yeah, Avery, go.
Yeah, no, I do love Power BI because it's got everything built out into the infrastructure. Power BI is a great conduit for me to introduce students to analysis because you got the visualization pane, the data pane, and the model pane.
I would agree.
And
the dashboard builder, and that can be automated based on new data flowing in. I loved all that. I thought it was just brilliant.
Well, what's funny is the students love it. So I'm teaching at High Point University and Greensboro College, and I just let my High Point University students kind of have access to my data. And I mean, it's funny, they're usually a pretty talkative bunch. It was just like crickets. They were all just like trying to figure things out. Because I think a lot of these students haven't had like this is data that is modeled off of real consulting engagements, and it's messy, and they're like so fascinated because they've kind of been in this like germ-free petri dish of a learning environment where everything is airtight and there's no contaminate. It's just not like true to the real world.
Yeah, yeah. It in our realm, I think this is similar to what you were just saying. I've sometimes heard people trash talk the practice data sets and scikit-learn or Kaggle competitions, and I'm like, why would you listen to that? Kaggle's awesome. These practice data sets, there's a lot to be learned from that. And then I can hear the retort, it's, well, but the data doesn't have enough problems. It's not like real world. Yeah, but it's better than nothing. It's close. And you know what? A lot of it, I bet you would say this, John David. I'm curious if you would. I can give you all sorts of practice data sets, even real world ones, but you're still going to encounter things on the job that you didn't encounter in your education.
Right.
You're going to still encounter data set issues you've never encountered before.
Well, okay, I'll give you a concrete example. We were looking at Google Analytics data, and what was funny is that I gave them, and see, this kind of, I feel like I'm bringing it all the way full circle to what I was talking about earlier of context are super important. So we were looking at Google Analytics data, and it's like CTR was one of the metrics, and they were like, well, what does this mean? I'm like, I'm a dumb baby right now. Google CTR marketing data, and I'm teaching them how to start to solve their own problem. It's funny because I feel lazy as a professor, but it's like, no, you need to go. I've carved this out, and we will talk about it, and like we can talk about like the research they've done, but they need to figure out kind of how to fish for themselves instead of me putting a perfectly seasoned and flavored salmon on their plate each and every day.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, agreed.
Awesome. So Thom, let's wrap up the episode. Where can people find you?
I prefer LinkedIn. It's not that I don't have a Facebook or Twitter account, but I maybe get on them twice a year. So LinkedIn is key. And then also, I'm really proud of the family that we've built with what we call integrated machine learning and AI. We have, so Guy Senkari, my dear Syrian brother, we teach a class on Saturday mornings that is basically us trying out the textbook or the book that we're writing under contract for PACT now. We're writing a book together on machine learning, and it's a unique take on how to teach that. But then right after that class, we have a mentoring session, and we call it integrated mentoring. And that's a really good term for it because we'll throw out a topic and we all mentor each other in that area with our best knowledge on it and encourage one another. And then we have a little after party for those that still want to keep hanging out together. But we're really more like a family that grows more together. And we claim that we're led by the spirit of more together. We don't want more than each other. We want to help each other be the best we can all be together. It's easier to climb the mountain that way, safer too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was an awesome session.
It's an honor to be on your show. I really like the way this show is growing and the guests you've had on. I'm kind of just honored to be among the people you've already had on.